Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Rounding the Bases presented by Community America Credit Union. Invested in you. We are heading into summer here. I guess, we're about there, right? This is coming out in June, and time flies as it always does. But this podcast, we keep on going every single week in or out of baseball season with the support of Community America, as well as my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. Whether you're in Kansas City like me, or say on the East Coast like my guest today, or anywhere for that matter, Chief of Staff, not just Kansas City, but an incredible company. If you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire someone, if you're looking just for a great resource and an energetic office, I love to partner up with them. So check them out, chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. I've got a great connection today, as I always do here on this podcast. Great leadership doesn't come with a playbook. Instead, there are people like today's guest who have lived, learned, and made it their mission to help others keep the line moving. My guest's name is Chris Gargano, an award-winning pro sports content veteran who spent more than 20 years connecting with fans from coast to coast. Now he's a podcast host and founder of the Gargano Leadership Group, where teams and business influencers alike learn to navigate the complexities of taking action and secure an advantage that is bigger than themselves. I am happy right now to be joined by the aforementioned Chris Gargano. Chris, how are you?
Great, Joel. Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. It's great to see you again. You are a wonderful guest on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
I knew you were a sports guy when we talked about, I think you did the reference, if you hadn't, I would have, when you talked about a home and home. Right?
Yes.
And so in sports terms, we see those now more so, I guess, in basketball and hockey, where you play one night in one place and then the other in the next. We had a few months in between. This might be more like baseball. We had a few months in between facing each other with the home and home, or facing each other's questions, I guess. But that's how I knew that you were a sports guy that had been around a long time doing this, just like me. I want to start there. I mean, you pivoted in your professional life, but a lot of years in sports. And before we talk about the impact and how that shaped you, because I think there'll probably be a lot of similarities between you and I. Tell me about the sports background, as those that are listening, you could see it on YouTube too, but those that are listening will see a bevy of Emmys over each of your shoulder, which means that you did this for a long time. Tell me about your sports background.
So, Joel, thank you again for having me. So I played baseball my whole childhood, right? And a little bit of football. And through that love, I just loved the process of baseball. So from that, I went and played a little bit in college, but then soon realized, Joel, like some of us, that it's very difficult to become a professional baseball player. So I had a mutual love of storytelling. So I made that my career. Literally, Joel, the day I stopped playing college baseball, the next day I was in the college radio station. I started writing for the paper and just fell in love with the storytelling, staying close to it. And then, so the first part of my career, I'm condensing 35 years into a few minutes, 90 seconds, because that's what we do, Joel.
That's right.
Which is that I got some internships in San Francisco while still in college. And then all of a sudden I said, you know what, this is what I want to do. So my first 12 years, I was a sports reporter anchor all over the country in 7 different states. It was amazing, covering the NBA and Major League Baseball, college football, everything. I just, individual contributors like, golfers and tennis players, and amazing. And I just learned so much and fell in love with that. And then it dovetailed into overseeing content departments in professional sports. I got recommended for the Oakland Raiders in charge of their content department, which I loved. Spent 6 years there, 8 years at the San Francisco Giants, and then 7 most recently at the New York Jets. So that's my sports background. And that's, where you saw the awards. It's those are group efforts. And that's what, every time I look at them, it's like, those are the people that I did this with. And we were lucky to be recognized. But that's it in a nutshell, Joel. It's that love of storytelling and staying close to sports, which I love.
I want to dive into this because I think it's interesting for people that aren't in our profession or with our background, for a couple of reasons. At least what I've learned is, one, most people, if they're a sports fan, they don't really know what our world is like, but they probably in some form or another wanted to be in it, right? As an athlete, as a reporter, but it's not a normal existence, and in part it's not normal because there just aren't that many of those jobs out there, and so it's a limited amount of people. And I've been lucky enough to do it for 30 years. You've been lucky enough to have been had it be part of your life for so many years. There are a lot of similarities that I think work in the world of business and leadership, that lessons that we've learned. But I'm just curious for you, like for me, I got into it because I love to talk about sports. That was it. And it just seemed like it would be the coolest thing to do. And guess what? It was. It is.
Hmm.
But that's so barely scratching the surface. Like there's so much more to it that a teenager or that a 22-year-old getting out of college could never have understood. It was just my dream to do this. And the beauty of, I guess, the journey, not to be too melodramatic about it, is all the lessons that have been learned along the way and the connections that have been made. You can't possibly know that when you get in. It's just truly an innocent, pure love of sports. I'm guessing that was the case for you as well. Beyond the realization that baseball career was going to have an end, and everybody faces that reality at a certain point, more at your stage of the game, or maybe at my stage of the game, which was well before college. Uh, and then it's okay, then what? Oh, wait, I could go talk about this and someone's going to pay me to go to games. Sign me up. Was that sort of where you were at too?
Yes. And here, I'll even take it more narrow, which is, and then Joel, as they say, as Steve Jobs says, you connect the dots perhaps as you get older and you see things more clearly. I will say that I love the process. I
Mm.
loved watching elite athletes, or any athletes for that matter, and how they approached the task. How, if it was a bowler, like what was in their mind? Why did they gravitate towards bowling? I have this curiosity. And if you marry what you really are about, which is an intense curiosity for life, learning, and everything, and then you take that and put it to your vocation, which in my sense, what you just said, you're talking about sports. Mine was, it's the same, but storytelling. Like, what is that story? I would be fascinated, like how a shortstop got rid of the ball so quickly, or a
Mhm.
quarterback was able to read the defense. I was, yeah, fine. They won 34-10. That's not as interesting to me. I want to know what it was like in the huddle. I want to know the relationship between the quarterback and the quarterback coach. What were the conversations in the meeting room? That interests me. I love the wins and losses. That's cool, but I love the process and how people think and how they interact with one another, and getting to that elite level is very interesting to me. So I made a career out of it, as you did.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, first off, we're all storytellers. Some of us are better storytellers, some of us are worse storytellers, but like that is one thing we all have in common, right? I mean, it's gone on since the beginning of time, since the cavemen. We are all storytellers, and whether we want to be or not. And some of us do it for a living, and others, look, I mean, it might be telling your own story and looking for a job. It might be promoting someone else. Whatever it is, there is an art to storytelling. And again, kind of going back, I didn't know what that was. I mean, if if you go to journalism school, or you study to be a broadcaster, or you study this type of stuff, you learn a lot of the right ways to do things, which, how to ask the proper way to ask questions, and how to find sources, these type of things. But they never really taught me about, I don't know if they really taught the art of storytelling, the nuance to it. They taught on the TV side how to edit effectively and tell that story. They taught how to write more effectively. And those were all very important. But I don't think I fully understood the power of storytelling and the nuance behind it until I understood how to build the relationships, which then opened up the doors of people being more vulnerable and sharing those stories, and then having access that maybe others didn't have. What was that process? Because I find the process in all of it really fascinating. Not just how the shortstop is able to make a play that nobody's ever seen before, right? It's sort of like the how does Steph Curry do what he does? Well, it's ridiculous amounts of talent, better than anyone. But what about the vision and the creativity, right? So there's so much to the process, but I think there's process too, just in the way we build these relationships and the trust that is built. What do you think?
Absolutely, and that's twofold. So when I was in traditional media, working for TV stations, right, and understanding those relationships, they're a little bit, I don't want to say surface level, but they're, I'm not in the organization, right, that I'm covering, or the university, or whatever the case may be. So the connection has to happen quickly. And I would do that, Joel. I would do that. Say I was out covering a golfer, and they have to trust me. I am going to tell a story that, and back in those days before social media, that's going to be seen by an audience. And I have a responsibility to portray that individual accurately and get to the core of it. So how do you do that within 35, 40 minutes or however much time you have? And it's caring about the answer, listening to the person, finding the nuance. If they're in front of the media a lot, right, they have answers that they give all the time. That never did it for me. I always wanted to know the difference, the core, the slight detail that I could ask. Wait, I saw you, and you were working on your 7-iron a little bit more than you were your 6, or the driver. Why? Well, because the 7-iron, and then you get those answers. That's a different question, right? Than, hey, you scored a 64 last week. So I would always look for angles, and then dovetailing into working for organizations. Then you have longer relationships. You're in the organization. So that's a different responsibility. That's really getting to know people and not being, transactional all the time. Hey, can we get this? Hey, can we get, no. Hey, how's it going? Let's walk to the bus together. Or let's, how's everything? Sit down for lunch if the case presented itself. So yes, connections and relationships, and not for just getting something from folks, but caring about them and working with them, Joel, working with them.
So I want to jump forward to your work right now, which is a lot of things, and it's very common, I think, for people in our sort of age range, where you start veering off into other things. I mean, I've had this TV job still for 30 years. I still have it, but yet the other 6 months plus in season is about the podcast, and it's about the speaking business and leadership and all of this that, quite frankly, has led to fulfillment that I never expected, and opportunity that I never expected. And I think, and I see so many parallels between our careers, that I think for me, when the light bulb went off, it was like, oh wait, there's something else out there besides TV. In my case, I'm really lucky that I get to do both, but TV won't last forever. I think the speaking and all the rest of it, if I'm in okay health, can last forever. If you got to stay relevant, and connections and relationships and everything like that. How did you get to what you're doing right now? And it's a lot of different things. Podcast host, and you've got the Gargano Leadership Group, and an adjunct professor in New York City. I can't imagine that any of these are things that you were thinking about when you're knee deep with the New York Jets or your earlier sports jobs.
Great question. I appreciate you asking it. So when I was with the San Francisco Giants, we were winning World Series. And sorry,
yeah, I was at one of them.
Sorry for
the. Well, it was the every other year thing. It was destined, right?
Right. In 2014 against the Royals, and I apologize, but no, it was anyway. So the job was getting complex, right? There was a lot of a demand on our department, and I was noticing, my goodness, this is incredibly cool, but we have to keep this machine running. So to keep the content department that I was overseeing, I wanted to get better. I wanted to be a better leader. It's that simple. I wasn't the greatest baseball player in the world, but I worked my tail off. If you call anyone right now or text anyone from my childhood, they will say that the guy loved it and he worked hard and tried to get the most out of my ability, which, it was, I had a little bit, but I, tried to make it the best. So that's the same approach I took to leadership, Joel. And I went back and got a master's degree at 46, 47. I don't remember how old I was. It was 9 years ago. So whatever. I'm not good at math. Anyway, Joel, that was the moment when I walked into that classroom for the first time at my alma mater, St. Mary's College of California. My life changed. And for those 2+ years or whatever years, almost 2 years, being in that cohort, learning from those professors at that time in my life changed everything. I didn't realize this, but I became a student of leadership, not just for me, but helping others see their journeys better. And Joel, I'll put it to you this way. So as you said, I teach at NYU. Some students talk all the time in class. Sometimes and some don't. When I was a student at this stage in my life, the professors, I had to control myself to make room for others. I was so into it. I could have answered every question. I wanted to learn. I wanted to know what that person thought and that person thought. So that curiosity, as we talked about earlier, now was leadership, and I was seeing tangible results. You have to ask the people that I led, but I think I was getting better, and I was seeing things differently, and I was listening better. I was collaborating. I was more compassionate as a leader. Then I got the job with the Jets, and I was putting all of that into action. And, and I have these close relationships with people from the San Francisco Giants and New York Jets as a result of just seeing myself better. And that's what triggered, Joel, the business that I'm in now. I said, I love this so much, learning and sharing and eventually teaching. And I started at NYU in 2018. This just feels right. And this is just taking over my being, right? It's like I want to learn, research, share, learn, research, teach. And that's just where I am and what I'm doing. And it's amazing. It's a great, great feeling to do this all the time.
You and I are around the same age, Gen X, but it doesn't matter whether you're a millennial or whatever age you're at. There's going to come a certain point where, at least for me, I think we start seeing meaning and purpose in a little bit of a different way. And it sounds to me like that came for you right when you walked into that classroom. For me, it came when I started my speaking business, but I didn't know that that was what was going to happen. For me, it was just like, hey, this seems like an opportunity, and let's see if it's something I can do. And then it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to learn and so much out there and so much fulfillment in all of this. What were your expectations when you walked into that classroom? Because it sounds like you got more than what you were signing up for, or what you were expecting.
What a great question, Joel. What a great question. Exactly. I had no idea.
Mm.
I had to, so you had going into the program, the master's in leadership studies. That's what the degree is in, the master's degree. And so in the process, you go through they talk to you, the recruiting call. I remember where I was sitting. I remember his name is Doug Paxton, an amazing individual. I remember the tone of his voice. This is before walking in, but I'll get to your question exactly. And I remember thinking the way he was talking about leadership was exactly what I needed as a human being at that time, not knowing what to expect. And then the first class, which I also remember where I was sitting, who I was sitting by,
Mm.
those big moments in your life, you do remember. And I remember thinking, Joel, I don't know where this is going, but this is what I need to be doing right now. As we were journaling, and I still have the notebook, as we're journaling that first session, I'm thinking, this is amazing. I can't figure out why I love this so much, and I was a very average, let's just say, undergrad student from 18 to 22, right? I got better as I went, but I had a rough start and trying to work with baseball and all that. So needless to say, I was a okay learner, but I could have been better. And I tell my students at NYU all the time, I'm very transparent about that. But as an advanced learner, I was pretty good. I was really into it, and I read every word and wrote everything, and it didn't come till I got finished with it where I could take it from a business standpoint.
Mm.
But that came pretty quick. That came, maybe 2-3 years later. I said, "Wow, this isn't going away. I'm reading all these books. I'm listening to all these podcasts. I've become an intense student of leadership."
Which is cool, right? I mean, I've always said I'll never go back to school. I don't know, maybe I would, but I can't, and I've spoken to, you know, um, different programs and executive MBA programs, things like that. And I'm always I just admire the amount of time and work ethic, because you can't skate through that like you do in undergrad, right? And I'm not saying I skated through anything in undergrad. It doesn't matter anymore. We're talking well over 30 years ago, but I knew what I needed to do, and you could get by. But the workload for that. So to make that commitment, and then to get that bug, and then to turn it into teaching, I mean, you've got your consultancy, but you're also teaching, and the podcast, and you're speaking. And I don't know the answer to this, but I get asked it sometimes. Like, I'll get asked some version of, if you had to choose between your broadcasting job in baseball or your speaking career, which one would you choose first? And, those are fun hypotheticals. Maybe they're not always fun. And my answer always is, well, to this point, I don't have to choose. and I don't want to choose. Now, when given the choice of a game versus a speech, I will take the game every single time, even though the speech might be financially more lucrative, because you know what? I show up for every game and I would like to continue showing up for every game. And so that becomes the priority. But to me, hey, I want to do both. But you do, when you have that many things going on, you do have to prioritize sometimes, right? So for me, it's like, all right, this is when the games are for 6 months a year, and then you fill in around it, and it's a little harder during baseball season. For you, you're getting pulled in a lot of directions. I would imagine that any of the classes that you're teaching, that's probably non-negotiable once that's on the calendar. And then you start to book around that. How are the priorities, or is there anything that you love more than anything else, or do you love it all? Because there's a lot going on for you, which is something that I can relate to.
So great. Another one. I love it. So in the classroom with the NYU students, I absolutely love. It is, I just absolutely love the exchange and how we cultivate our class and the literally the culture of the class and our learning environment. Love it. And
Mhm.
that's very similar to workshops that I do with clients, right? 6 people, 15, 25, whatever the case. It's that sharing and learning, and then you could see the light bulbs going off, and people, playing off one another. Yeah, that was cool, that little activity we did, or that the way you presented this is allowing me to think about this for myself. That is useful. And then you get emails or texts on the back end saying that was very impactful. And then the podcast, Joel, as you mentioned, I love doing that. I love learning about people. I love listening to them. I love their stories, and I get criticized a little bit on the podcast because I don't talk enough about me, and so I'm trying to figure that out. But
Mhm.
that's our DNA, right? It's about the other person.
Yep.
It's about their story, and that's a thing I'll either work out or I won't. It'll either continue. I want to listen to people that are giving me constructive feedback, but I also like to be selfless in a nature that highlights you or highlights them.
Yeah.
So I'm still learning, Joel. I am still learning. I'm learning the business I'm in. I'm learning how to best market. I'm learning, but where I'm dialed in to answer your questions, when I'm with people, I am prepared, researched, and ready to go. And hopefully they'll say that, yeah, that guy, he made me think differently or impacted me in a way that I could be useful tomorrow or the next
Yeah.
week or in that meeting.
You know what's been interesting for me, and it sounds like we're on a similar path with this, is that I really struggled with the whole making it about me piece too, which I think for some people that are listening, they may say, well, wait a minute, you're in the spotlight all the time. Of course it's about you. Now, if you look at most of what I do, what you did, during your broadcast days, it's telling other people's stories. And so if, like in my case, if you come up in a news background, unless you're like, I don't know, maybe like, the wacky morning show, host or personality, or, maybe like the morning weather person. But like for the most part, if you're working in a news background, it's not about you. There are certain great personalities, like, our color commentator in baseball, Rex Hudler, will always say, hey, it's about the game. And he sincerely means that. But he's such a great storyteller and such a character that he is part of the story always, and people love that. But I think that there's something that's true for all of us with that. But when we've been raised a certain way in the business that I think you were and I was, you've been trained to not make it about you, even while you're in the spotlight. And what I've come to learn in recent years, and also still learning, is I had a lot of people along the way saying you need to be more vulnerable when you're on stage. You need to be more vulnerable in your book writing. You need to tell your story, and you need to open up a little bit more. And I knew that was the case. It just didn't feel right until it did. And it started to feel right when I realized that the reactions I was getting by being more vulnerable were better reactions, that people seemed to be more moved by it. People could relate to me more instead of just being some guy that was talking about everyone else. And that's a hard place to get to. And it sounds like you're working on that too. I mean, that vulnerability piece is hard because I think it could feel like you're being selfish just talking about yourself. But really, what I'm starting to learn is it can be selfless because it helps other people. And so why would you hold that back if it's something that can inspire and help others? Where are you at with that journey?
Wow.
Sorry to go so deep.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. Privately, meaning like things that are not public, I'm extremely vulnerable. In other words, in my classroom, workshops, one-on-one, my clients in that regard, very vulnerable. Publicly, not so much, because it goes to that adage. Not, and you said something that I would want to bring out here. You said we were raised in the business to make it about other people. Well, I could take that even more. I was raised to not make it about myself.
Yeah.
I have wonderful parents and family, and we just don't do that. It's just we're, there's a modesty to that. But I agree with you, Joel. I agree with you that vulnerability and that sharing helps people see themselves in you and what you have overcome. And I have stories of failure and stories of success and everything in between. And I'm comfortable being vulnerable, very comfortable. I think you could tell by my nature. That's selfishness. I'm working on it. You could see it's an issue, and I'm trying to figure out, did Chris post this, post that? Yeah, but everybody else is doing fine. I don't need to do that. You know what I mean?
I'm so there with you.
Yeah. I just was not raised that way, but to have a successful business to some degree, attention is the thing. I'll be vulnerable now. I am a work in progress with this. I want to deliver great work, be recognized for that work, to be recommended for other work. But as far as like telling everybody, I'm fading here. I'm fading on it.
Yeah, I remember when I started in this, and then I hired someone to do some of my marketing, and the deal that we basically made is, she did a great job, but it was she basically said to me, let me do the talking about you. And even though it was my voice, she's like, I basically said to myself, just turn the other way and don't look. Like, I want to make sure everything that's being said, it sounds right, and I'm going to prove it. And then I just don't really want to see it because it just doesn't feel right until it did, right? And then it's like, wait a minute, how come everybody else is allowed to do this and we're not giving ourselves permission for it? And so that's the way you were raised. Personally, same for me in a business standpoint. And it's like the equivalent of listening to your voice on an answering machine. Back in the day when there were answering machines, it was like, I sound like that. Now, being on TV for as many years as I have, I know what I sound like. It's just normal, but it doesn't feel right. So anyway, I want to move on to my baseball themed questions for, in this case, a baseball guy, but they're not really baseball questions. So in your long career, and a career that has had an incredible pivot, what's the biggest home run you've hit?
It's that master's degree, Joel. I know we've talked about it, but it's going back and becoming a student at that stage in my life. And I'm not recommended that. Not everybody wants to do that. You said you have thought about it. There's other people, but that continuous learning just changed everything. Everything, my worldview, how I see, society, how I see politics, how I see sports. It was a gift. So making that decision was the second best decision I've ever made, next to marrying my wife, Joel.
Yes. Well, that's always everybody's first, by the way, which I learned early in this podcast that I had to say, professionally speaking, unless, your wife is your business partner or something like that, because everybody was saying their wife or their husband. I'm like, which is great. I hope everybody says that. But you can do both, right? And so congratulations on both. How about, she's not allowed to be in this one, I hope, but how about a swing and a miss and what you learned from it along the way?
Oh, this is a great question. So, all right. So, as a leader in professional sports for those 21 years, there's not one thing I think about, that is that monumental elephant in the room failure. There's been many. Let's be clear about that. But when you ask me this question, here's what I think of. They're micro failures. So or swing and misses. Let's stay in the baseball, right? So you have someone who reports to you. They come into your office on a Tuesday afternoon and they have a question for you. And you're thinking, wow, this is a heavier one. How am I going to respond? This is in real time, right? And you're thinking, you're listening, you're watching their body language, and you give them what you think they want. And you see, okay, that from their facial reaction and or the words that they're using, you say, I'm staying in baseball here. I probably grounded to third on that and threw across the diamond. I'm out. I did not say the right thing. I did not do the right thing. They're going to leave that office feeling either as they did when they came in, or a little bit worse, and that's not good. So those things, Joel, ate at me when I was in those positions, right? I wanted to deliver that home run every single time. But in leadership, in life, you can't hit a home run every time. So that's one of the many reasons that master's degree, going back to the first answer, was so valuable, that I think I got, and then you have to ask the people, but a little bit more awareness to make them feel like, oh, we can do this, and I can do this, and my comp, you know what I'm saying? I just got, I think, better. So the swing and misses are, when I was not where I wanted to be, right? And not the leader that I wanted to be in those small moments. Because life is a series of small moments. It's not always those grandiose failures or successes. So that's how I would answer that.
Yep, I love that. Really, really good stuff. And yeah, life is a series of failures. That's why I like baseball so much. It's a sport of failure. And what moment really is that big? I mean, you're going to swing and miss on something every single day. Some of these guys sometimes may have a 3, 4, 5 strikeout day. So the last of the baseball theme questions is small ball. You're familiar with that. That in baseball terms, I just saw one recently. The perfect execution of small ball, scoring a run to ultimately win a game without getting a hit in the inning, and a runner on second base with no outs in extra innings, and a nice simple ground ball to the second baseman to advance the runner to third, and then sacrifice fly to knock him in. But the guy that makes the out gets no credit for it, gets a hero's welcome in the dugout, even though statistically he's never going to get any credit whatsoever. A lot of respect for doing the right thing in the moment. That's small ball in baseball. I don't need to tell you that, but I wanted to be able to share that story because it was the moment I saw it, I'm like, this is the way it's supposed to go. What are the little things for you? What is small ball to you in the real world?
Consistency, Joel. Every time I walk into those classes at NYU, or in my workshops, or an individual client, or whatever my deliverable is on that day, consistency. That does not mean being the same all the time, just not variations of a different person, right? In other words, let me dial into what we're doing here today. And that, as you know, Joel, as you get older, you hopefully get a little bit better at being present and understanding, okay, listen, I know I'm not having a great day, but they may not having a great day. Some of the students might be stressed out about finals, but I have to be there for them. So I'm going to give them a consistent version of myself, genuine. I'll say, hey, back to the transparency. Hey, guys, great to see everybody today. I was a little bit late. I had a little bit of traffic, or I'm a little tired today. But here we go, right? That's like energy, enthusiasm, controlling my attitude. And that all comes into consistency. Again, not being disingenuous. If something's on my mind, here's what we got. Here's where we're going. All right, let's do it together today. I need a little bit more from you today for this reason. And you're smiling and you're bringing people in. And so that's what I worked on and learned how to do. And it's taken, here's what it comes down to, Joel. It's this, the question, the little things. It's that kind of similar to what we were talking about, marketing and being out there. It's leadership is not about you. It's about the people that you're serving. The leadership is about them. And if you have that, like when you're giving a talk or whatever, and you have that in-service mentality, you can be more consistent because you're doing things for other people. And I enjoy doing that.
Good stuff. Great stuff. Love it all and agree with it all. All right. 4 final questions as we round the bases. I want to dig into a little bit more of your services and the Gargano Leadership Group. GarganoLeadership.com is the website. So we'll have that in the show notes. And there's one section of your website. It says, what type of leader do you want to be? GLG, Gargano Leadership Group's coaching, consulting, and workshops all center around our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. So I wanted to talk about some of those pillars, beginning with curiosity as my first question, because I decided that was going to be my word of 2025. I've said this a bunch of times now on the podcast this year. I'm not a New Year's resolution guy, because I equate the word resolution with something you only do in January or for a limited amount of time. But I thought a word of the year is something that I can focus on for the year, and hopefully it creates better habits. And I thought curiosity was my word of the year because as long as you do so, and you know what, I'll attach one of the other pillars that you have in there, self-awareness. As long as you have curiosity with self-awareness, meaning at the right time, not bothering people and slowing people. If you get too curious, well, then curiosity kills the cat, right? And then you're annoying, and people are running away from you, and it's harder to build the relationships that you talk so much about, and that I talk so much about. So tell me about the benefits of curiosity. To me, the best storytellers are curious. The best leaders are curious. What's your take?
So, right. So you just drill down on the practical nature of what all of us would think curiosity, how it manifests itself, which is asking questions, right? I understand that. Of course, that's part of it. But having a curious nature, like an open-minded nature, like when you walk into a meeting, not being, what am I going to say? Here's what I'm going to say. I want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to come across this way. That's not curious. Curious is listening. Curious is a good, and you brought up the other pillar, which is self-awareness. What's my body language? We talk about this in class all the
Yes.
time. And Joel, I think you and I talked about it when you were on my podcast, whether on it or off, which is, body language is so powerful. How do you walk up to baseball? How do you walk up to the plate? How do you, go visit a guy on the mound? All of this matters.
Mm-hmm.
And being curious and open-minded, like, okay, I'm going to find out what the pitcher has to say. Or in business, I'm going to go into this meeting open-minded to what people are saying and thinking, and gleaning that information, and then I could talk, when appropriate. That's curious to me. It's not always, hey, why did you do that? What did you do that? That's part of it, but that's a little bit, let's call it level 1. Level 5 is all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
How am I listening to Joel today? Am I watching his body language? Because Joel, that goes back to the first part of our conversation. As a reporter, which I came up in the business, that's information.
Yes.
You mentioned Steph Curry, right? How does Steph Curry, what's his mood today? They play the Mavericks later. How is he today? Is he at ease? Is he tense? Did he, go through his normal pre-shot routine in practice today at the shoot around that morning? That's interesting. Kind of taking that's curiosity to me. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah,
That's something
no,
that fires me up. Yeah.
me too. It's what it's something that was never taught. I'm glad you're teaching it, because I think you can get so far by not being the person that others find annoying or in the way. Like, you might have the greatest relationship with Steph Curry or fill in the blank athlete or boss or whoever it is. But if you start to, in their minds, if you start to become the person that is in the way of them doing what they need to do, or they're having to deal with you on a day where they don't have the energy to do that, then you lose some equity there. And over time that builds and builds and builds, positive or negative. They may not remember the positive as much, but they remember the negative, and that makes them push themselves away a little bit. Okay, the other pillars, I think optimism, we have a general, I don't mean to poo-poo that and make it sound like it's obvious, but I want to talk about alignment and what you mean by that and why that's important.
Okay. So we have a story that we tell ourselves, Joel, right? We wake up and we think, okay, here's where we're going. Here's what I think is important. Here are my values. Here is what I stand for. So my alignment, when I get people to uncover that, talk about that, think about that, write down your values. Why are those important to you? Here's why they're important to me. Okay, how do they apply to your business? Okay, here's how they apply to my business. It's when people get in trouble, per se, is when those values that they've declared, they're in alignment, they feel good, they go, and then all of a sudden a tough situation at work happens where they have to make a decision and those values are challenged. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? Are you going to make the easy decision, or are you going to take a stand? Are you going to, believe, here's why I believe it, here's where we're going? And can you verbalize that? Like the difficult conversations when you're in alignment, when your values equal how your behavior is, how you are as a professional and personal, and everything is aligned, you can have difficult conversations easier because you know what you stand for. Example, my value is, I'm being hypothetical here. My value is that I'm going to be open-minded in my approach. I'm a coordinator at an organization, and I'm going to be open-minded and a consistent learner. And I'm going into a situation, and then, all of a sudden somebody's challenging me on that. How am I going to say that? Well, part of my other value is I'm a good listener. So I'm open-minded, I'm a good listener, but they're challenging me. Well, you have to stop and say, okay, what do you mean here? Let me understand you better. You're putting that into action.
Yeah.
And let's have a conversation. I'll listen to you, you listen to me. Joel, last part on this. Sometimes people will say about difficult conversations, I have a situation. Here's what they'll say: I have a situation at work. I need to have a difficult conversation with this person. I need to tell them that they are coming late to work too often. And here's how that's disruptive: it causes other people to not see that we're all committed at the same level. And they'll be telling me, but I really need them tell them, to how this impacts other people. What should I say? And I tell them, you just said it.
Mm.
That's perfect. It's perfect. You're aligned with why it's important, how you're going to say it, and how you're going to deliver it. It sounds perfect. You have your reasons, your values. You want other people to see that they respect, the time in which we all have to be here today. As an example, just say that. And they look and they go, you're right. Okay. You just said it beautifully. It's so we could get into detail on this, but that's what alignment is. It's like knowing your values, why you think something and being able to communicate it clearly.
All right, third question as we round the bases. You got a chance to work for some of these incredible teams, and I always laugh, like, I went from the St. Louis Cardinals to the Kansas City Royals, and then a lot of sports fans are like, well, why would you go there? The Royals aren't any good, and last laugh, Royals won the World Series in 15, but really it was never about that. Like, I'm joking with that because what I think sports fans, for the most part, they're just thinking as fans, which of course, that's the beauty of fandom, and oftentimes irrational and emotional, and it's an escape from life, and that's what it's supposed to be. For those of us in the business, it's work, and I think that you learn how to separate that, to me. And so, you work for the Jets. Nobody ever says anything good about the Jets. Yet I'm sure your experience there was incredible, and almost everybody would have loved to have traded spots with you too. What did you learn working for NFL teams like that, where again there are only so many of those spots in the world, and it at least for me, I always look at it as a privilege.
Oh my gosh, what did I learn is the question.
Yeah,
Oh my, how complex it is, how the business. Somebody asked me yesterday, what is the difference between the football, because the NFL draft when we're taping is
yeah.
going on, right? Is what's the difference between the football side and the business side? Does one have anything to do with the other to the overall success? And I looked at them and I said, absolutely. The CFO is the CFO for everything. The owner is the owner of everything. The president, well, sometimes there's division in the president here, president there, but they talk all the time. There has to be a cohesive culture that comes together so you can win in business, ticket sales, merchandise,
Mm.
sponsorships, content, and you can win on the football or baseball field. But you talked about football, right? So what I learned is that alignment, right? The stories they're telling each other, the values that they have, the more that is cohesive and there's communication, clear communication, the better the organization will be. And there are some teams or organizations that are really good at it, some that are okay, and some that struggle, that they're trying to figure it out. Like, how do we get to that? Listen, we're aligned. Here are our values. Here's how we deal with hardship. Here's how we deal with success, and we can go forward together. And that's just constant communication. So I learned through all the three organizations that I worked with that the more effective you can communicate, the more successful you will be, both in business and on the field.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes left. Here's the
Yes.
walk off. This is the big one, because I was thinking about this. Is on your website, it says get to know people. Managers who were rated highest on balancing relationships with the results saw 62% of their employees willing to give extra effort and only 3% quietly quitting. That's from the Harvard Business Review. And you talk so much about relationships. You are teaching a generation of kids that have come up through different circumstances than we did, in a pandemic and social media and the world. And everybody, all Gen Z, they can't do it. They don't know how to do that. First off, I think there's a lane for them if they can learn how to build relationships to raise above a lot of their peers. But there's also, we're not going back in time. This is where we're at in the world too. What's real quick, what's the biggest challenge for the younger generation right now in building those relationships?
So they tell me that exactly what you just said. They tell me that their number one concern in class and in workshops is developing connections. Joel, it's just being aware of it, right?
Yes.
People say, like, what is the next generation? They're amazing.
Agreed.
My students are amazing. And the young professionals that I am so fortunate to work with are amazing. They're great learners. They're sophisticated. They look you in the eye. Everything is dialed in. Now, is that all of them? No. But is that all in our generation? Heck no.
That's right.
So my point is that I don't think we have to worry. From my point of view, I'm one person. I tell them that in class all the time, but I just have a warmth when I think of the students that I'm fortunate to work with. So to answer your question, they have to work on it. They have to make a conscious decision. You could walk around. I say this all the time. I sound old. I don't care. You could walk around Fifth Avenue or in and around campus or in the buildings and put the headphones on or look down at your phone. That's your choice. That's your understanding of how you want to conduct your lives. But then when you say I don't have connections or I'm uncomfortable talking to strangers and such, well, the world is your oyster, as they say, right? So you can go to the coffee shop and say, hey, how's it going today? Or is that societal norms nowadays? No, but it still goes on, and it's still interesting to learn about people and hey, let's have a conversation or whatever. However you do it, that gets you. It's just, Joel, it's like anything else. It's reps. It's reps. A little
Totally.
bit of an uncomfortable conversation, absolutely. But the more you do it, and the more you're giving joy to somebody, or you're having an interaction that you remember, you never know who you're going to meet. And when you're shut off like that, you're not going to meet anyone. You might DM some cool person along the way. That's cool. That's a way of meeting someone. But the way to get better at connection, which they tell me they want to do, is to practice,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And it's not easy. It's not comfortable, but you do it once and twice. The reps, I tell people all the time, it's everything. Everything is about reps. It's all batting practice over and over again. It's not all supposed to be exciting. And that's how you get comfortable. That's why you don't get nervous in front of a television camera. No, I've done it a million times, but I used to be. It became more comfortable. So life lessons there. I want to encourage everybody to check out Chris's website to see more about his services. You can certainly book free consultation with him. I highly recommend GarganoLeadership.com. GarganoLeadership.com will have the website, the information in the show notes. Also, he's got a great podcast too, and a good baseball term in that one. Keep the line moving, right?
Yep.
So that's a great baseball term. We use that one all the time. Chris, thanks so much. Shout out to Damon Lemby for introducing us, and he's been on my show and vice versa. And I think all the same for you guys as well. Another good baseball guy too. Chris, really appreciate it. Thanks for spending time today.
Joel, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Jeez, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Go Bird. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Go Bird.